Peloton ride at 9 a.m. this morning.
Sorry,
Be there,
everybody,
be square.
We dropped off for a second. It had to do with I don't know, maybe Jeff talking about his Peloton ride or something. Um,
People love when I talk about Peloton.
I think I think X just dropped it for that. No exercise talk on a Monday. Come on. All right, so let's talk about Nike. As I had mentioned just before we got rudely cut off. Um, Nike, where is this? Like, how is this? We talked about grades for other retailers. How are they executing right now? What's the valuation like? And what are you doing ahead of this earnings report?
It's been a legendary shit show. I mean, it's one of the all-time worst years you're ever going to see. The best trade that I've done on this show, just in terms of something people could actually do, something I did myself, was to buy pretty much everything else in the shoe world, in the universe of things you put on your feet. And you could short Nike for a long time. And the big question is now, can you short it still with the stock off 30%? I don't think you can. I think that we're too late to that party because we're at a point now where it literally, any analyst that you see that's worth their salt, frankly, will tell you right away that Nike's having a really promotional quarter, which is retailees for their marking their crap down because they can't give it away at full price. Now, the problem with that, they would love to blame the consumer, just because every consumer would, oh, we've got these headwinds and we've got terrible things that affect all the consumers, so nobody's buying shoes, except people are buying shoes ass over tea kettle. They can't get their hands on Ons enough. They can't buy enough Hokas. There's literally a line out the door to buy Uggs, for God's sake. So at full price, at full everything. You listen to Foot Locker, and they try to be polite about it because Nike, they still are carried 40% Nike product. But Foot Locker said outright, they said, listen, we're really promotional in our stores, much more than we would like to have been, than we would have to have been. Now, the truth is Foot Locker controls all their inventory except for Nike. So when they say we're more promotional than we expected, that means that Big Papa Nike came down and they started marking things down like crazy because they couldn't move any shoes. So we're going to hear a terrible quarter from them. It's going to be about whether or not the new CEO has been in there, 3 months now, a couple months, long enough to have a story because he's an old guy that was there before. What's he going to tell us? And it's going to be entirely on what his story tells us, David. And so we're expecting him to miss, to take numbers lower, and if he clears the deck and comes up with a compelling story, and Nike does pride itself on its ability to spin a lot of a story, they should be able to start finding a bottom here. It's a real easy name for a broker to sell someone. It's a real easy name to say, this is off 30%, and they're still Nike, damn it, and haven't you ever seen them? But the truth is, in the marketplace right now, they are losing share dramatically, really, really fast. And it's been kind of a disaster. This has been the worst Nike year that I can never remember, really, just in terms of the consistency with which they missed their guidance kind of over and over again. They didn't have their finger on the pulse of the consumer at all. They used a lot of metrics. Like last quarter, they were talking about their ubiquity in Paris, how it was impossible to miss the brand. At the same time, they missed revenue. They missed on the top and bottom line. So, you know what? If you're spending top dollar to advertise at the Olympic Games and you're selling athletic shoes and none of that advertising leads to any sales, that's a bad thing. That's not something you put in the bullet points of your earnings release to say, geez, did you see our commercials? Because the point of the commercials is to sell shoes, dipshits, and they didn't sell any shoes. So that's a real problem.
So did the new CEO, when he came on board, did he reset guidance initially, or is this the first guidance, the first quarter?
He kind of did a hand wave. This is not a 3-week fix. So he's kind of at the helm now. We're expecting a lot more from him this time around. They axed the CEO last time. I believe it was right a couple weeks, maybe a week before the last quarter, which was a pretty good foreshadowing that things weren't going to be so red hot. But it's at this point he's been back long enough and been there long enough where we're starting to see what his plan is. They're going to go back into Foot Locker. Foot Locker was limiting them.
But what I'm asking for, as someone who doesn't follow it closely, when he joined, did he reset guidance already once, or is this going to be the first reset?
This will be the debt clear. This will be the what for the next year? What's our plan? This is when he's going to be setting a Nike still calls itself a growth company. They still like to pretend. He was pretty conservative, but he hasn't come out with anything firm on this is what we're going to grow like for the next 3 years. So it's not a company you can really model all that well right now. Expectations are that they're going to miss, they're going to guide lower, and they'll set kind of a new plane starting from this moment on. So in terms of valuation, seems expensive because I know they're going to earn less this year than last year, and that's going to has an ongoing trend and figures to continue for the next year. But again, that's kind of what we heard from a few different companies, and their stocks went much higher. I think the expectations here are pretty well beaten in, down 30% for the year.
Okay, so you had you and Ben and a couple others on the group here have been short it for a while, and long some other footwear and other retail names, and it's been a wonderful trade. Is this where you kind of just close it up and say, well, you know what, I don't want to have a spike here?
I don't want to be short them here. I'm not short them here at all. And I think that even if you're short, it's not going to trade off its multiple. It's going to trade on what the perceived brand value is there. There's no reason they brought in this last CEO because he felt like consensus was that he had a better kind of grip on how Nike should be sold and how the relationship with retailers should be. But he's not going to have specifics yet, and that's going to take a while. So this thing will turn like a battleship. But if I was going to trade it, I would look for speculative long takes because, again, the numbers are not going to be good. And that is not just consensus. That's just kind of, it's common wisdom. It's people start from the assumption that they're going to be bad.
Yeah, well, sticking with
It
the
is
grading system.
amazing. I mean, they're definitely under earning now, but when you look at the value, I mean, I wouldn't be shorted here either, but I couldn't get excited about being long this. I mean, when you think about the valuation here, it's still 19 times EBITDA, almost 30 times earnings for a company that is completely not performing. And you know what? You can look at like small little companies that have been, crushing it for years. Like Crocs is 7 times EBITDA. Just is 8 times EBITDA. It's more than double those, but okay, those aren't I mean, in their little niches, they have global presence, but okay, you can say fine, they're not the global powerhouse. But even Adidas or Adidas, as the Germans say, is it 14 times EBITDA? It's a 5-point multiple difference to Nike, and Adidas is crushing it right now with the Samba, right. And like the low profile is a look that's it. It's kind of like there are two things going on, right? Because Hoka is very, stacked, and so is the On shoe, but those are about specific comfort and performance features. But in terms of a look, low profile like the Samba, and then the Onitsuka Tiger, which is owned by, I think, Asics in Japan, if I got it right. But like that's the look that's going and has been going for a while. And even Adidas, which it's hard to say that's not a huge global brand, managed to come back from like the self-inflicted wound of all those years of the Yeezy business going away in an instant. And look at how fast they turned that ship.
Yeah. Well, I'm amazed. I'm amazed that New Balance is doing so well, and that's a mainstream brand. Like they're not like they're kind of fashion forward now. They weren't 5 years ago, but it's interesting. I guess all of that volume, Nike had a lot of volume, and it's going to a lot of different players.
Right, to everybody. But I mean, New Balance has always been a great performance shoe for people who actually run. So. As opposed to wearing it for non-running, although the real volume and money in all these businesses is people wearing them to walk from the couch to the bar. But still, like it is amazing. There's been a lot of crumbs to pick up.
I mean, look at what Nike's given up. First of all, they're trading at 28 times next year's earnings and 22 times trailing. So that's not really the direction you would like that to be going the other way, with earnings going higher. But it's the story of Nike's failures is the story of the success of Lulu. Nike's been doing basically athleisure since Lulu was just a gleam in the eye of the folks that started that, and they gave it all away. They've done nothing with that. They tried to make their own retail shops. They're not very good merchants. They make very expensive stores that don't actually sell shoes any faster than the other ones. They're expanding those efforts there, so I'm not very excited about that. And to Bernard's point, the real sneakerheads in terms of the people that are in it for the performance have always sort of thought of Nike as a little bit of a lesser option than some of the New Balances of the world, some of the super tech specific. But Nike always spent the most on the tech. They advertised it the most. They kind of created the most buzz, and that's just not working for them at all right now. And so if it were as easy, Adidas fixed their shoes. Adidas had a ridiculous relationship with Kanye West. They got out of that. They took the hit, and they managed to just get back in style. It's not that easy for Nike because they got to have too many oars in the water, and they're kind of all a little rotten. It's their retail is not that great. Their apparel is terrible. They're still kind of married to Jordan. It tells me a lot. To me, the quintessential Nike sum up for their year is that they're paying Caitlin Clark $8 million a year, and they don't have any Caitlin Clark shoes, and are not going to until at least the back half of next year. What the sweet hell are you folks doing? And maybe you should get around to doing it faster.
It's such a
Yeah, and
great
also, I mean,
business.
I think that some of the stuff with Nike and marketing, I think a lot of women are, have heard about how the sports deals with female athletes have differed from the ones with male athletes, how they were treated when they were pregnant and stuff. So I think a lot of women already side eye Nike a little bit. Plus, anyone who reads the paper and knows about like the issues they've had at corporate with some of the female employees and male executives and blah, blah, blah. So, like, from that perspective, I think that they're working out of a deficit. So then to get like the most prominent new female athlete, in
In
years
history,
and not
in
and not
ever,
be like totally ready to support her is just insane.
Yeah, I think she
and
got
there's been a lot of it.
Athlete of the Year for Time or Sports Illustrated this last weekend, and there's a little bit of a brouhaha over that. But the reality is, Nike doesn't have a shoe for him. I mean, it's such a great business school case of how badly do you have to be run to not have just to slap on something onto a shoe that's add a tag to an existing shoe if you have to.
Well, the real business school
Cap,
story for Nike is going to be how they basically sold their souls to kind of take out their own retailers. And so they cut off all the vendors just so they could become their own pipeline. 5 years later, 4 years later from that initiative, they've spent billions and billions of dollars. Their DTC sales are actually declining, and they've got terrible stores. One of the problems with Foot Locker is that they're partnering with Nike because Foot Locker doesn't have deep enough pockets to create the next model of the Foot Locker kind of selling space, which is going to be a bunch of Air Jordan apparel that nobody wants because, my kid doesn't like Jordan. My kid's freaking 18 years old, and Michael Jordan's just a surly old guy that used to play basketball to him. I have no idea who they're going to with these brand extensions, but yeah, it's make the stuff for Caitlin and maybe let Michael Jordan kind of retire a little bit.
Oh, and I don't know if you saw, but like Academy also announced last week on their call that they're getting, a big expansion with Nike, which is, just goes to show how desperate Nike is now. I mean, I think Academy is a fine retailer. I've been, a fan of them for a long time, but Nike was cutting off retailers and narrowing their distribution, and now they're going to, a multi-hundred store chain, and that's growing.
Aggressively. And right, and they're reversing it, and they didn't do that just in a total vacuum. The idea of it was that they would be able to control their own destiny in terms of how they marketed and presented their brand without being in all these other little kind of ritzy ditzy stores.
And
But
have the data around their customers,
what's that?
more closely, and have the data around their customers more, by choosing like Dick's and JD as their retailers of choice, and kind of, shoving, places like Academy and Foot Locker to the side a little bit, let alone all the mom and pops out there, which is, for the serious runners, a real channel,
Yeah.
and the real athletes. Like a lot of people want to go to a specialty store in this, um, that by sort of giving them the boot, it was all about trying to get like the data around their customers more directly, because I think they were
Right.
working with Dick's on that, and now you can tell they're desperate because they're, I think the strategy was flawed. I mean, I guess you can look at it here. We go back to the half full, half empty glass. On the one hand, you could say it's half empty because they must be desperate if they're going back on that strategy. On the other hand, maybe the glass is half full, that they're willing to admit their mistakes or that the world has changed, because it reminds me a little bit of like Netflix saying forever, we will never, ever, ever have ad supported. We don't want that. It's bad for the experience. But the world was going to ad supported. So they made the decision, to add ad supported. So, in that case, I think it was a sense of, a sign of a flexible management. Here, flexibility is good, but the fact that they, sort of bet the farm on this and it was the wrong bet, maybe they should
Right.
have tested it more.
And
Yeah,
remember,
it's interesting
Starbucks and
because
Nike.
again, if you go to a Foot Locker, a traditional Foot Locker, and you have lots of different brands, people like that, and they may still buy the Nike, but they like going. But when you go to a Nike store and you only have one choice, lots of different selection among Nike, you somehow don't feel the same. And I think you're right, they shot their own retailers in their friends in the foot, no pun intended, that way. And we have a Nike store near us, and they set it up sort of like an Apple store. It's very nice. Uh, Everything is quite expensive, but you go in and you go, well, okay, well, I want to see something else, and you just can't. So it's kind of like a one and done. If you need something right away and you know that you're just gonna get a workout shirt, then great, go. But if you're really shopping for shoes, shopping for sneakers, you're not going to do that. But well, I do want to wrap it up since we do have a two-parter today. That was an interesting technical glitch, but subscribers are getting this plus so much more when they're members, because they can go get our chat and also some reports as well. So the roundtable is really just the tip of the iceberg. You get live updates, real-time access to our pros. And so if you're interested, go to wallstreetbeats.com, become a member. You get Jeff, Berna, and me, as well as a bunch of our other colleagues, a lot more content. And we'll see you tomorrow on Wall Street Beats. Thank you, everybody.
Bernie, you going to the mall this week?
Probably not. I don't know.